Howdy folks, and welcome back to another amazing jam-packed episode of Nerdstalgic. This is my 10th episode, so it's a huge celebration, really excited, really happy. I thank you all for being here, even though technically this isn't my 10th episode. This is technically this will be my 18th episode, if you factor in all the side quests. But if you don't factor in the side quests, technically this is my 10th episode. I'm doing well. Hope you guys are doing well. It's a big celebration for me, really big day. Like, I am extremely happy and extremely overjoyed that we've managed to get to this point and that people are still listening and people like it and people are giving great feedback. So I just want to say, before we start, I want to say thank you to everybody who supported me to get into this point. As I mentioned in my first episode, this has been a dream of mine for a very, very long time. Something that I've wanted to do for, again, a long time as well, and to finally get around to sitting and doing it and people enjoying it. And again, like, obviously my first worry was the fact that I didn't think anybody would want to sit and listen to me ramble and waffle about things I like. I guess that's the worry for everybody when they first start a podcast is, will people like what I have to say? Will people be interested? Or is it just going to be me talking to myself as usual? But to find people, being interested, sharing it, retweeting, liking, sending feedback, telling me that they like the topics I'm talking about and giving me sort of ideas for topics to look into in the future, it's all been quite surreal. And considering I only started in January, it feels like I've been here for a very long time. I feel like I've improved, I've got more confident. I feel like it's easier to do this now than it was when I began. And I know I'm only 10 episodes in. This is something that we really should be doing when I'm at, episode 50. But I just feel that in such a small amount of time that I've grown so much. I've made loads of friends, like Chat Tsunami, for example. They are an amazing podcast group. Two guys that just talk about gaming and stuff like that. I really enjoy their work, and they've become good, I'd say good kind of close colleagues, friends. I'm not really sure how you'd pronounce it because we're only not recently. We've recently been talking, so I don't know how you structure it. But I hope to work with them more in the future and kind of get to know them more. And it's just been nice to be welcomed. That's the point I'm trying to get at. It's just nice to be welcomed. So I want to say thank you to everybody who's listened from day one, who's currently listening today, who's helping and supporting me through this. It means a lot. And yeah, we're at 10 episodes, and hopefully we get to 20. Get to 50, get to 100. We'll just see where the wind takes us, but I'm really happy. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody so far for the support. It really means so much to me. So now that's out of the way, today's topic is one that I've been wanting to do myself from day one, and it's been it's one of those, like the Discworld last week. It's one of those that has been asked from me by a lot of friends of mine to talk about, and I've hinted at it here and there about my joys of this said topic, but I've never really properly done an episode on it. So I figured, you know what, it's my 10th episode, my celebration. I've done 10 episodes. Why not? Why not sort of open the lid to that treasure chest. Trying to find a word of things you open. I can't believe I got stuck on things you open. All right, yeah. Try to open that treasure. Yeah, 1 second. I can speak English. I know I can. Yeah, try to open that treasure chest to really sort of delve in deep into this topic of mine that I have great passion and love for. And if you've read the introduction, you kind of give it away, and you know what we're in for. Today's topic I'm going to be talking about is the Ninth Doctor from Doctor Who. Like I said, this is one that's been asked of me for a very long time, and it's one that I've been thinking about. And as soon as I knew that my 10th episode was getting close, it's one I put a lot of thinking in. I sat down and was like, I'm really gonna try and focus as much as my nerdism as I can on this one topic. And as we will go through them, you can see that I rewatched a lot of episodes, and I got into a lot of things and graphic novels and stuff like that. So I really delved deep into this one. So I hope you guys enjoy it and hope you find it fascinating as much as I do. So without further ado, let's cease my babbling and let's get on with it, shall we? All right, let's go. Now, back in 2005, Doctor Who came back onto the scene after, I think, the Doctor Who kind of got cancelled around about 1989, if I believe, with Sylvester McCoy's Doctor, the Seventh Doctor, which then led into, I think, I still haven't watched it, and I feel bad that I haven't watched it. One day I will get around to it, but that led to, I think, the late 90s, with the Eighth Doctor, which was with the Doctor Who movie, which, like I said, I haven't watched it as of yet, but I love Paul McGann. Paul McGann is a fantastic Doctor. I've listened to a lot of Big Finish audios of him, and he just has such a silky voice. Oh god, you just want to fall in love with the guy. But that's not what the point. The point is, Doctor Who was cancelled, and it was tried to be revived in movies. The movie didn't do very well, shall I say? And then, as far as everybody else knew, Doctor Who was dead, was ceased, was gone. Now, as I've said, I was born in '98. Prior, so I didn't know about Doctor Who. I didn't know it existed. Didn't know nothing about Doctor Who. That was until 2005 came along, the revival. And I remember watching the BBC One adverts for it, and it was an actor that I knew, but I only knew him from one movie, Christopher Eccleston. I only knew him from Gone in 60 Seconds, the Nick Cage movie where he played the villain. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Again, I'm only young. I'm like, oh, yeah, that guy was a villain. What's the Doctor? What is Doctor Who? I don't know what this is. As far as I was aware, Doctor Who was a brand new TV show. It never existed before. Nothing had come before it. It was just 2005, and that's it, right? So that was my mindset going in. I saw the adverts. They blew me away. And if you remember the adverts to advertise Doctor Who when it first was getting relaunched was crazy. Like, it was, for some unknown reason, like, these scenes were never shown at all. These scenes were purely shot just for advertising. You had moments of, like, the Doctor running down an industrial hall, and then for some unknown reason, explosion behind him. It's just a lot of running. The Doctor loves to run, and then all of a sudden, do you want to go on an adventure? Do you want to come with me? And then Rose, Billy Piper would appear, and again, my little mind was blown away. I'm like, what is this? I don't understand, but I'm intrigued. So I remember the first episode came out, Rose, and I was blown away. I really was. And as we went on with Doctor Who, I became more and more of a fan. A big lover of it. A really big lover of Christopher Eccleston. I remember that, like, they had these things called battle cards. I think they were called battle cards. It was kind of like cards you collect, and it had different monsters on it, the Doctor and Rose and Mickey and Jack and the Savine and so on and so forth. They were on there, and you could collect them, and then it's kind of like Top Trumps. It had like stats on them, so you go with your friends, and you could kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, compare, and whoever got like the best stats won that card, and so on and so forth. I never used it for that. I just did it for all collecting purposes, knowing that I had a Savine, or I had like they did it for like David Tennant, and I don't think they did it for Matt Smith, but I know David Tennant's run, they carried it on, and I remember I had a K9 and I want to say Krillian, but I can't remember what they're called, the big sort of pterodactyl things that when we first meet Sarah Jane. But that's not important. That's the 10th Doctor. When we get around to the 10th Doctor, eventually we'll talk about him. But yeah, I remember I had all the cards and I had magazines, and I really, really loved Doctor Who and toys. And one thing I never got, which I don't know as to why, but one thing I never got but always wanted was a sonic screwdriver. I never got one. I don't know as to why I didn't. If you'd think, me as a young kid really loving it, and that's the Doctor's sort of main tool, that I would want one or have one. Never did. I'm currently on the hunt for a Ninth Doctor, or even a 10th Doctor, because they're relatively the same. The only difference is the 10th Doctor's ones extends, and I don't think Christopher Eccleston's ones does. But I'm on the hunt for one. So if you listen to this and you have one, or you know where to get one, please do let me know on Twitter. But yeah, Christopher Eccleston, Ninth Doctor, he was my first introduction to Doctor Who. He is my Doctor. No matter if even though he wasn't there for like only one season and we didn't get enough of him, you always remember your first Doctor. No matter who it is, no matter if you came to that Doctor at the end of their season or the middle of their season or the beginning, you always have your Doctor, the Doctor that was there when you were growing up. And for me, it was Christopher Eccleston. Even though that I am a huge fan of David Tennant and I love Tennant's Doctor, and for a long time, he was my Doctor. He was my sort of main Doctor. When everybody would ask me, who's your favourite Doctor, it'd be David Tennant. And that was only reason that changed was as I've grown up and as I've gotten older, and I've gone back and I've revisited the older episodes of Doctor Who and rewatching it from the beginning, and seeing and having a better understanding, and now having a better understanding of not just Doctor Who, but have a grown-up mind and have a nerdy mind, and rewatching Christopher Eccleston in his first season, it kind of gave you that sort of insight of like, God, this guy's a lot deeper than my little young brain would ever understand. And his acting is a lot better than I remember it being. Not saying his acting was bad, but I'm just saying, like, because I'm older, I just see it more clearly now. The younger sort of interpretation is gone. The older interpretation's here now, and I can say, well, actually, this guy deserves more love. This guy deserves a lot of appreciation. And it kills me even today when I talk to Doctor Who fans and I ask them about, oh, what do you think of Christopher Eccleston, the Ninth Doctor? And it kills me whenever you hear these words. Oh, I skipped him. Yeah, it really hurts. It really does hurt me when people say I skipped 9. I think you're a fool. I know it sounds horrible, and that's kind of really horrible to come out with, but I think anybody who skips 9 is really foolish. I get it, it's only one season, but you can't skip 9. Yes, 10's amazing, and I don't blame people for wanting to jump to 10. I really don't. But Christopher Eccleston had just a way with his Doctor that I will go into more depth later on. But Christopher Eccleston's Doctor was one of those where he was very intense, but you could tell that he was going through a lot, that he'd been through a lot. And as we find out with the Time War, we can understand that. And obviously, hindsight being a very beautiful thing, we now know about the whole. We had Paul McGann. He was in the Time War, and he was kind of struggling with the Time War, and he went to the. I can't remember what they're called, but for argument's sake, to kind of get the story going, we're just going to call them the Witches' Coven, because they are kind of like the Witches of Gallifrey. And Paul McGann's Doctor goes to these, asks them for help. They give him like a potion to help him regenerate, and then he ends up regenerating into the War Doctor, John Hurt. And then sort of the War Doctor goes on. There are books, and there are Big Finish audiobooks on the War Doctor, which I haven't really got into that much. I'm mostly going off what I've seen on the show, and obviously my own sort of deep dive with my notes, as you can hear. Go through my notes of what I could find and put together. Because obviously Big Finish is great, but it's there's too much of Big Finish to really get through for one episode. So if I ever do get around to the War Doctor, I promise I will jump in to that in more in depth, and I will spend a lot of money, because trust me now, when I say Big Finish is expensive, it's expensive. You need to sell a kidney, okay? So we're not going to jump into the War Doctor, yes, but because of hindsight, we now know that Paul McGann went into the War Doctor, which then regenerated into Christopher Eccleston, and as you can imagine, the guy's still got a very warlike mind, suffering from PTSD. I think all the Doctors are really suffering from PTSD. It's just that as time goes on, it's less and less, and it's gotten to the point where, where you got to Peter Capaldi, where he's purely just, as he says to Bill says to him, "Have you ever killed anybody? Like, do you even care?" And he tells her, like, "I'm over 1,000 years old. I've never had the time to to care. I have to get on with it and deal with it." So it's kind of the point where you can see the evolution of the Doctor, where like he still reflects, and the Time War still affects him, but he's gotten to the point now where it's just the fact of, I can't change it. I've just come to terms with it. I don't like it, and I'm going to be judged by it, but it's just the way it has to be. Otherwise, I am not going to be able to be me. I'm not going to be able to do what I need to do if I keep reflecting on it. So whereas we see Christopher Eccleston, he still is very much the warlike sort of mentality, and he's trying to come out of that. And you can see, and again, I'll go into this more clearly later on, but you can see that as the season goes on, this one season, he tries to redeem himself, and he does redeem himself near to the end. But I'll go into more detail in that later on. But Christopher Eccleston, hands down, is one of my favourite actors to play the role. Sadly, again, we only got one season with him. Again, that hurts, but obviously if you look into it, you understand as to why. I don't really want to bring up old drama, but the long and short of it, there was a lot of creative differences between Christopher and I think the director or writer, or both. I can't really remember for sure, but there was a lot of creative issues there, and eventually Christopher Eccleston just decided, okay, we ain't going to come to an agreement. I'm going to go my way, and then you guys can go next, which is a shame, again, because I would have loved to see more Christopher Eccleston. Again, quite recently, Chris Eccleston has gone on to do Big Finish as the Ninth Doctor, and he's been doing loads of audio sort of plays there. Again, I haven't listened to those either because, again, I have to sell a kidney and an arm to buy those ones because they're new, so they are expensive. One day I will get into the whole Big Finish when I've experienced more. I have experienced quite a few Big Finish, but not as much as enough to properly delve deep and to talk about it. But I would just tell you now that if you want to get into Big Finish, good luck, and sell some organs and maybe some jewelry, and then maybe your house and other things like that to to afford things, because some of them are cheap, but then others are just so expensive, especially box sets. Oh god, I ain't gonna get into it because I'm gonna be here for ages. But yeah, one day I'll get into the Big Finish. But he is doing sort of audio stories on Big Finish. He is doing things like that. He did do some of the books. Well, not tell a lie. He did do some of the books. I mean, he did do some of the audio plays for, like I said, Big Finish. But sadly, he didn't do the books. But I feel like he's. Obviously, I don't want to say things that I don't know. Again, I'm not Christopher Eccleston. I don't know what he was thinking or feeling, but it feels like now he's slowly kind of coming back into it, but in his own terms. Like he said himself recently that he wouldn't come back for the 60th anniversary, and he said that he would only come back if they had him on his own. Whereas, his doctor who only works is one of the doctors that wouldn't work on a multi-doctor story. Chris, his version of the Doctor isn't a multi-doctor. His Doctor is just the Doctor, and that's it. He doesn't work well with other versions of himself, which I understand. Which again, I will get onto more detail in that later. See, there's a lot to cover here because the Ninth Doctor, like, you've only one season, but he's incredibly in depth. There's a lot to the Ninth Doctor. There's a lot to all the Doctors, but you would think after one season there wouldn't be a lot, but there is. There's so much to get into. But yeah, so as I said, Ninth Doctor, my first introduction of it, blown away, and he is my Doctor. And again, it still kills me that people say they skip him. But hopefully, if you're listening to this and you're not a Doctor Who fan, or you, again, yourself, you skipped the Ninth Doctor, or you're just here to kind of see what Doctor Who's say Doctor Who's all about, because that's a completely different video. But just come in just to kind of get an idea for Doctor Who and see if it'd be something you're interested in. Then I hopefully will try to convince you as best I can to not skip the Ninth Doctor and to generally give him a go. So the way this structure is going to work, the way I'm going to do it, is that I'm going to talk about the episodes. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about every single episode because we'll be here for hours and hours and hours. I've just taken out some of my favourite episodes, and I'm going to talk about them in very brief brief ways. Again, and then I'm going to talk about the books. Again, I'm not going to talk about all the books. I'm going to talk about 3 of my favourites, and then I'm going to talk about other sort of forms of media that he's been in, and then I'm going to talk a bit about the Doctor himself and my theories and thoughts on Christopher Eccleston, the Ninth Doctor, and then we're going to end it on the overall thoughts. So this should be fun. So now we've had my sort of introduction to Doctor Who and where I started and my love of Doctor Who began. Time to jump in with the episodes. Those episodes that really sort of brought Doctor Who into the forefront, which made my love of Doctor Who so solid nowadays. So on to the episodes. Now, as I said, I'm not going to go into every single episode because we'll be here all day, and your time is precious, not just to me, but to yourself. So obviously, I don't really want to be here yammering on about every single episode because we'll be here for ages. But I will say there are 13 episodes in this season. Technically 14 if you include the Christmas special. I don't, because obviously that is primarily the introduction of and sort of starring David Tennant. You don't really see Christopher Eccleston at all. So I don't class the Christmas episode, but usually when you get the first season of The Doctor, it's usually bundled in. Again, I'm not sure as to why, but it is. But either way, in my interpretation, there's 13 episodes in total in this series, and here's some of my favorites. Yeah. So, first off, one of my most favorites, which should be on everybody's top list of favorites for 9, is Rose, which is the first episode, the first real sort of, for me anyway, the real sort of taking in of what the Doctor was and who the Doctor is. It was my first introduction. It starts off quite simple. Rose, she's an average, normal human being. She goes to work, she goes home, hangs around with her mum, talks to her boyfriend, goes to work, rinse and repeat. Average, normal sort of girl, right? Then, she's at work. She gets told to go down into the cellar to drop off. I think it's like bingo money. So again, a normal average thing that somebody might do. And then next thing she knows, without any sort of realization that she's in danger, she becomes again like in danger, come attacked, and then the Doctor just appears out of nowhere. She's gonna die. These wax figures are coming alive. They're going to attack her. She's any normal random person, and all of a sudden the Doctor comes, grabs a hand, and Shays run, and they run, and that's it, and that's the introduction to the Doctor. No sort of big grand sort of thing, just a simple short sort of story of like to kind of tell you the idea of like Rose is an average normal everyday human being, and that just by meeting the Doctor her life has instantly changed, and that it's not just changed the fact of what's going on in the situation. It's fact of now that the Doctor saved her, she is now a target. She is now a point of interest for the living plastic, and one of my favorite lines from this episode, where he comes in, he goes, I'm the Doctor, by the way. What's your name? She goes, Rose Tyler. He goes, no, it's me, Rose Tyler. Now run for your life. And then the building blows up, and like it's such a clever way to introduce not just the Doctor, but to introduce a character. You know what I mean? It's not just the fact of, oh well, Doctor Who revive. We can do some big brash sort of amazing sci-fi CGI effects, and we could probably do the TARDIS flying in and landing, and the Doctor just appearing and stuff like that. But they decided to ground it. They decided to kind of make it more sort of realistic in a way, where like it's just an average Joe, average everyday sort of human in a ties of Rose, and then she just meets the Doctor and her worlds change. And you as yourself, the watcher, the viewer, your worlds change as well, because he's not just grabbing Rose's hand, he's grabbing your hand, grabbing your imagination and saying, run, come on, this adventure with me, let's go. And as the episode goes on, you get a better understanding and more fun of Christopher Eccleston and what his Doctor is, and how that, he's probably recently, regenerated, and that he is just trying to find his way. He's kind of like, the war's ended. Now what? Because obviously one thing you've got to realize with the Time War went on for a very, very long time, and he had to do a lot of things that he didn't want to do, and that it took a toll on him. So I feel with this Doctor, and again, I'll go in a bit more detail of it later, but I feel like with this Doctor, he was just trying to find his way, trying to find, like, how do I get back into the groove that I used to be before the Time War? And that is basically how this episode is, that kind of introduction to Rose, the introduction to Chris Eccleston's Doctor, how he's trying to be the hero, how he's basically trying to be the guy that he was before, and that he's just trying to go with the motions and obviously getting a companion and not being on his own. Again, so that's what I love about Rose. It's not just the introduction, but it's also that kind of idea of, that this Doctor, he's lost, but he's trying to do the right thing. Kind of like Spider-Man, where it's like he's just trying to be better. That's the best way he could do it. He's just trying to be better. He's been done wrong for a long time. He's just trying to be a better person and just do better. And I think that's very nice. Again, that's not really currently. It might be evident if you're an old Doctor Who fan, but obviously, this is my interpretation from hindsight. Being a fan of the newer Doctor Who's and watching the whole sort of story with the War Doctor take place, that we sort of know this bit of trivia to be true. But yeah, that's how I sort of interpret it. myself anyway with Rose, and that's why Rose is always at the top of my list, because it was just the best introduction to a character I've seen on TV for a very, very long time. So number two is The Empty Child. Now this one I love it because it just shows the Doctor in full form. This is the Doctor at his best, where he is the sleuth, he's the detective, he is basically trying to help anybody during, the Second World War, but he's trying to, again, like I mentioned, he's trying to be the hero again, he's trying to be the savior again. This is his moment where he can genuinely help somebody, where like during a war, it's not a bad thing to try to save one or two people. During a war, I think it's quite sort of, when everybody else is taking lives, you want to be saving lives. And I think that's the way the Doctor sees this way. So he just wants to try to solve this mystery and help this child, these people. And he does, and he does it in such a beautiful, wonderful fashion. In this one, we meet Jack. I quite like Captain Jack. I just think he's funny, especially with this team. He's all right with David Tennant, but I feel like when he's with the Ninth Doctor, I think he's just extra bit of sass, extra bit of funniness. Before Touchwood and all that kind of made him a bit more sort of, he was still kind of, jokey, the haha sort of thing. But like, I think before Touchwood, he was more just kind of like, joking around, not really taking things seriously. And not very serious Jack. But as I mentioned, like with the Timeless Child, that's a different story. With the Empty Child, it's very lovely. Like, are you my mummy? The Doctor gets moments where he can have a laugh and have a joke, and with the Rose that tries to get him to dance, and he's like, "Would you mind? I'm trying to Rose. I'm trying to resonate concrete." Again, it's very silly, very stupid, but I just think it's funny. One of my favorite moments in this is actually not one of Christopher Eccleston's best moments. It doesn't even involve him. One of my best quotes from all of Doctor Who ever is this one simple line where they all started waking up. They've all got these masks on. They all start to wake up from these masks and kind of realize what's going on. Where are we? And this old lady goes up to a doctor, not the Doctor, just a standard doctor, goes up to him and goes, "Doctor, I came in here and I'm a bit confused." And he goes, "Well, what's the matter?" And she goes, "Well, when I came in there, I only had one leg. I've got two." And he looks and he goes, "Well, there is a war on. Are you sure you haven't misplaced it?" Again, it's silly, but it's one of my favourite sort of quotes of all of Doctor Who. It's very stupid, but it's just, again, very clever, funny writing. But I keep saying the Timeless Child. No, different story. Stop. Ugh. The Empty Child is again one of my favourites, just for the fact of he gets to be the hero. He gets to be the saviour. Captain Jack messes up. Makes mistakes. So it's down to the Doctor to fix it, to save the day, to be the hero, and he does. And we find out that the villain is not actually a villain. It's not anything really. It's just doing as best as it can with what it's got. With the nanites, and that the nanites are just trying to help, and he realizes that, and he fixes them when he helps them, and it's very wonderful. It's very loving. Again, it's played out as very dark, very sort of scary to begin with, but as the story goes on and you realize what's happening, it's a very sort of lovely sort of story. The whole idea where the Doctor he can be the hero for once, and I think that's what he wants, and that's what he was trying to be. He doesn't want anybody else to die, so if he can help everybody and save everybody, he will, and he does, and it's wonderful. The next episode is the Dalek. It's just called Dalek. This one has a different contrast to the last one that I spoke about, the Empty Child. This one is where the Doctor is dark. This is back where he goes back to his War Doctor sort of mindset, where he's no longer the hero. He sees his mortal enemy, the last living Dalek. And he's sort of, you have moments where especially when there is a moment where the Doctor has a confrontation with the Dalek, where he sits and he has a chat, and he goes, I watched my world burn. I killed you all, and I killed my own people. And he has that realization of like, damn, I've not only like killed my own people, but I've killed yours too. I won. I'm the last one. And it's that moment of like, oh god, I am only the last one. that everybody's gone and I am on my own, and I'm just like this Dalek, that I am on my own. And again, you have that sort of, it's one of those, how can I explain it? It's one of those sort of introductions with the Doctor where if you didn't know Doctor Who, you didn't know about the Time War, you wouldn't understand the Doctor until this moment. You wouldn't understand the Time War up until this moment. This moment is done so brilliantly, where you get an insight into the Ninth Doctor, and you can see that even though it's not blatantly, he doesn't say, "Oh, I did X, Y, and Z," but you can tell from his speech, which is an incredibly powerful speech, that he did a lot of bad stuff, and he's killed a lot of people, and that he isn't, especially Rose. When Rose hears this, you can even see on Rose's face that this is not the man I thought it was. This is not the man I thought I was traveling with. This man's got a dark past that I don't know about, and he tries his best to kind of rationalize the whole idea, like what I did was right, that I did the right thing, but then he also realizes that I've been telling myself that lie for so long that it wasn't the right thing to do at all. But it was. It was a means to an end. Like I didn't want to do it, but I had to do it. You know. Um, yeah, it's a very sort of interesting insight. And again, as I mentioned before, this whole season is about the Doctor's redemption. It's never made clear, but this whole season is just about redeeming the Doctor redeeming himself, proving to himself that he's the man that he used to be. He's no longer the warmonger. He's no longer the soldier. He is, the adventurer. Because he never wanted war, but he had to get involved in the war. And like I said, this again, I'll go into a bit more detail now. But like one of the main key parts where you see in this, where you see the evolution of the Doctor, and you can see this redemption arc, is at the end where like he basically goes to shoot the Dark, and he's like, "Rose, get out the way." And she's like, "No." And he's like, "Well, get out the way now. Like it's a Dalek. I have to end this. I have to do this." It's like he killed all my people, and then kind of Rose sort of shows the Doctor like this Dalek is different. He's absorbed Rose's sort of feelings. He's becoming sort of human, and the Dalek itself is starting to feel emotion. It's starting to understand that, or it's starting to come to terms with who it is and what it's done. And it's starting to feel emotions, and it doesn't understand why it feels sad and why it feels hurt and why it feels lonely, And the Doctor kind of, within hearing the Dalek and within seeing himself finally come out, like his sort of dark side, again, it's that moment of redemption where the Doctor doesn't shoot the Dalek, and he's just looking. He's like, I, uh, I don't. I'm sorry. He kind of puts a gun. He puts the gun down. He's like, you can see in his eyes that he doesn't want to be that person. That he allowed that person that he said that he would never be again to come out, just because he saw his enemy. That he needs. There's a lot more work needing within himself. Because he no longer wants to be the warmonger, the war hero. So it's a very interesting, very deep sort of story. Next one, second to last, is Father's Day. The reason I like Father's Day is because it messes around with time. Now I know you can say, well, Doctor Who always messes around with time. It does. It does always mess around with time. But what I love about Father's Day is that it messes around with time in a clever way. In this one, Rose figures out, and we figure out one of the reasons why the Rose wanted to travel with the Doctor in the first place was the reason why she changed her mind, wanting to go with him in the first place, was because she found out that the TARDIS could go in time. It could go forwards and backwards in time. And we find out that her main reason wanting to go on with the Doctor wasn't just the adventure, but it was to go back in time and to see her dad. And they do, for once, to go back, and within going back and doing that, she changes the timeline, and she gets the Doctor and herself stuck within a time loop. They get into a time loop where time keeps repeating itself, where they are stuck in this ever, like I said, infinite loop of this car keeps going around, and they're getting hunted down by these sort of, like, I think they're called Reapers or something like that. There are like celestial beings that try to keep the timeline um, fixed, like try to keep the timeline sort of from breaking, really. Kind of like the Time Lords, but they work like interdimensional sort of thing. And the Doctor and Rose kind of have to fix this sort of issue, and it's a very lovely sort of deep sci-fi sort of episode where, like, they really get into the whole idea of time travel and the science fiction sort of side of it all, as well as Rose gets a sort of lovely sort of moment where she gets to kind of meet her dad and talk to him, and kind of just has closure. And it's guys to, even though they sort of realize in the end that her dad has to die, that he's the key to fix this, um but it's still that sort of lovely nice moment where um she gets to kind of have last words with her dad, and then to kind of tell him about all the things that she's done and all the places she's been, and how her mum is, and just a nice little thing. I think something that the Doctor kind of is quite harsh on her, but and so rightly, because again she does kind of almost break time completely. Um, but I think it's a thing that we'd all do. I for one, I know there's people that if I had the chance to go back in time and to see them and talk to them again, I would in a heartbeat. I wouldn't sort of argue. I'd be like, yeah, go on, fine, no problem. I'm there. I'm coming. Um, and I think, again, everybody listening to this, you'd probably be the same, where, if you were given the option to go back to see a loved one or a friend or whatever, you would, without a doubt, would be like, yeah, I'd happily go back and see them again, So um, it's a very sort of loving sort of story in that respect. And I enjoy it for I enjoy it for the time travel part of it, which I know sounds silly because all of Doctor Who is time travel. But I mean, I enjoy it for the fact of the aspects of really delving into what it means to kind of mess with the timeline and what happens, and the deep sort of science fiction sort of part of it. I think I really enjoy it for that, as well as the creatures and the monsters are quite sort of creepy as well. Uh, Anyway, finally, moving on, we have Bad Wolf. Bad Wolf is one of those terms that just appears everywhere in this season. Not just in the season, but if you read the books, Bad Wolf appears in the books as well. Bad Wolf appears in the graphic novels. Bad Wolf appears in these episodes. And obviously, once you've got into the Bad Wolf episode and you realise what it's all about and as to why it appears everywhere, then um, you figure out what it all means. You know what I mean? You understand. Oh, this is why I keep hearing Bad Wolf everywhere. It's a lovely little Easter egg. Whenever I read anything with Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, the Ninth Doctor, whenever Bad Wolf appears, I always have a little giggle, because I just love the sort of, it's something I don't think I've ever seen before or since in any other sort of Doctor Who medium, where they've just had this longing sort of thing in the background that just appeared, and it's just like, I've always here, I've been here all the time. Or maybe there has been, it's just not been as prevalent as Bad Wolf, especially now knowing it and watching the older episodes and just seeing Bad Wolf written in the background and being like, ah ha, you know. Um, and obviously, it's all coming to a close now with this last sort of episode with Bad Wolf, and the Doctor sort of figures out what's happening, what's going on about the Bad Wolf and what it all means, and um, what's going on really. Like, what's the story? What's the point to it all? What does it all mean? And when they finally figure out what it means and the whole sort of climax to it all, um, again, is for me, it blew my mind. It still kind of blows my mind now, because obviously I know it's coming, but it's still that sort of thing of like, oh, I can see the breadcrumbs that they hid here and there, and especially in the books and all that, where they just kind of left little bits here and there. And it's just a very sort of clever writing. This team that was together for the first season generally had a major passion for Doctor Who, and they knew what Doctor Who should be and how to write Doctor Who, and it was just, the writing was just so clever, so smart. obviously I know I've spoiled a few of the episodes, but I'm not gonna spoil the Bad Wolf episode. I feel like for that one, it's just one that you need to kind of see it for yourself. Um, but I really enjoyed, like I said, this episode. Like Linda for a Y, for Linda with a Y, for example, she deserved a lot more. To be honest, I would have loved if Linda stayed on as a companion, but sadly she doesn't. Again, I would have happy if Linda replaced Rose, because Linda just seemed at this moment in time. Um, I think like Linda would have been great with the Ninth Doctor. I think Linda would have been great, to be honest, with the 10th Doctor. But sadly, it wasn't meant to be. Um, but obviously, without going to spoilers, this is kind of when I was talking about redemption for the Doctor. This is the point where the Doctor redeems himself. This is the end sort of moment where he is no longer the man he used to be. He is now the man that again. He's no longer the War Doctor. He's now the man he used to be before the War Doctor. He's the traveler. He's the hero. He's um the person, the Doctor. You know what I mean? He's the guy that comes when it hurts. And that's who he is. And again, this is that overall sort of end arc with it. And it's very nice, and it always makes me cry. Always makes me tear up. The little monologue he has near to the end, and again, it's just lovely. Generally, really, really lovely. So those are my favorite episodes. Um, I feel like I went a bit too much with them, even though I decided I'm not going to talk about loads. I feel like I went a bit too much with them. Um, but those are my favorite episodes. What are your guys' favorite episodes? What is your favorite Ninth Doctor episodes, or even just Ninth Doctor moments in any episode, really? Obviously, let me know on Twitter. So yeah, now the episodes are out of the way. Let's move on to the books, shall we? So, onto the books. I promise this one won't be as long. I just had a look, and the last segment was 22 minutes long. Sorry about that. So I promise this one won't be as long. So I'll try to condense it and be as sort of focused as possible. So one of the things that the BBC always seem to do, they don't do it as much anymore. But one thing they used to do back in the early 2000s, if they had a TV show, especially if it was big and popular, they would usually do books based off it. Doctor Who, no different. Apparently there's been Doctor Who books for a very, very long time, following the old sort of Doctors. Again, as I've mentioned many times with my reading, I never really sort of was into reading, and obviously, especially 2005, I was still I think I was in primary school, so my reading was atrocious. So the whole idea of books and reading weren't really for me. So my introduction and my sort of enjoyment of the Doctor Who books have only really been quite recently. It's only I think it was last year when I finished the all the books in total. There are 6 in total, and I've read them all. I've listed my 3 favourites. There are loads that I could go through, just to kind of give you an idea of what they are and what they're called. To give you like a better understanding of what these books are called, we've got the first book, The Clockwise Man, The Monster Inside, Winner Takes All, the Divergent Strain, Only Human, and The Stealer of Dreams. All great, all fantastic. Only out of those 6, only one that I didn't enjoy. The rest of the 4 or 5 stars being great to amazing. Only one of them was a 3, and that was the Deviant Strain, which I ain't going to talk about it because it's not that good. So those are the books in total. My favourites, in order of how I've got them written down. So book 2, The Monster Inside. The reason I love The Monster Inside, and one thing I didn't mention in as I was talking about the episodes, which I wanted to condense it. I could have happily sat here and spoke about every single episode, but I wanted to condense it, so it's not as long. But one of my favorite episodes in Doctor Who was the introduction of the Savine. I love the Savine. I'd love for the Savine to come back. I don't know how they would do it. But I'd like to find a way just to bring the Savine back because they're really fun. They're really interesting. You know, my farty friends, as I used to call them when I was younger, the farty people. Um, I really just enjoy the Savine, and the monster inside kind of follows on the story. Well, not follows on the story from the episode, but kind of follows on sort of versions of the Savine. Because obviously the things with the Savine is that they're not one race; they are a family race. You know, so how the Savine works is they have huge families, and each family rules a certain part and a certain thing. In Phalappatoris, Raxmacoris, Raxmacoris Phalappatoris. I think I'm really butchering that. That's basically that gobbledygook that I just tried to say is the name of the Savine Homeworld. Valapacoris, it changes every time. I'm not sure as to which part it starts and which part's the beginning, which part's the end. I feel like I'm getting the both ends mixed up. It's a very difficult name, and I feel like they did that on purpose for really, really hard, make it really hard for people. But yeah, it kind of introduces a different sort of faction, different sort of family of the Savine. You'd have highlights of what's going on, of what happened in the TV show, where the Doctor mentions like I met one version of your family on Earth, and they were trying to do X, Y, and Z, and it's again, if you watch the TV shows with as I did, I again, it's really nerdy of me, but I looked at when, say, like a said episode was released, and then I looked at when the book was released. So I'd be like, okay, so I will watch this episode or that episode, and then I will read this book, and then I will watch next episode, then I would read this book, and that's basically how I did it. I didn't finish off the episode, all the episodes, until I had read all the books. I did it in time, if that makes sense. I did it all sort of as you would if you was watching the show back in the 2000s. You would watch an episode or two, then the new book would come out, and you'd buy the book, read the book, and then you'd watch the next episode a week or so later. So that's how I did it, kind of to get myself in the mindset of like the early 2000s. So to have little hints of just like, oh yeah, we recently met like Savines on Earth, and I'm like, oh yeah, because I watched the episode where the Savines were introduced, and then I read this book. So again, it's that very streamlined sort of moment. Um, the synopsis, the blurb for this book is: the TARDIS takes the Doctor and Rose to a destination in deep space, Justica, a prison camp stretched over 7 planets where Earth colonies deal with their criminals. While Rose finds herself locked up in a teenage borstal, the Doctor is trapped in a scientific labour camp. Each is determined to find the other, and soon both Rose and the Doctor are risking life and limb to escape in their distinctive styles, but their dangerous plans are complicated by some old enemies. Are these creatures fellow prisoners, as they claim, or staging a takeover for their own sinister purposes? And obviously, as I've mentioned, as I've kind of spoiled, those enemies are the Savine. But it's not what you think. I'll just say that one of the things I love about the books, and one of the things I will mention before I move on to the next book, is that the way I see external media. So if you're gonna do a TV show or a movie, if you're going to do external media, whether that be comics or you're going to do books, um, I feel that those things should try to push the envelope further. So, say for example, you like Doctor Who, where you can get dark, but you can't get dark, dark. You know what I mean with Doctor Who, because kids still watch it, so you can't do too dark, but you can go close enough where it's okay for kids to watch. Kids might still get scared, but it's okay for them to watch, but sort of not be, overly terrified where they don't want to watch the next episode. You know what I mean? Um, One thing I love about the books is that it's not that they go to that point where it's scary dark, but they just go to another level. There are moments in these books where the Doctor goes again, like I said, he goes dark. Rose goes dark. There's moments where not swear words, but sort of kind of really sort of words you wouldn't think, like the word slag and stuff like that. You wouldn't expect it to come up, but it does. Not in this book, in the book I'm going to talk about next. and stuff like that. It's kind of like, God, these words and these moments in Doctor Who. But I've spoken to people who've read the older Doctor Who novels, the New Virgin ones, and other sort of Doctor Who media in the past. They said, "Oh God, I haven't seen nothing." Apparently, the older books go heavily into things that you would never think Doctor Who would go into. Um, and I'm not saying that to kind of put people off. I'm just saying the fact of, what I love about these books is that they go deep, they go dark, they go places the TV show can't go, in a good way, not in a bad way. Like, I know I mentioned, it uses some language that you wouldn't expect, but it's never like overly explicit. It's more just kind of like horrible sort of names, like the word slag and stuff like that. It's as horrible, like, oh God, I never thought I'd heard that word in Doctor Who, but um it pushes the envelope, and I like that. The all the books sort of push the envelope, um, and I enjoy that, especially like in the next book, book 3 in this series, Winner Takes All. Winner Takes All sort of is based on Earth. The Doctor and Rose are back on Earth, and they go to basically meet sort of Rose's mom. Rose hasn't seen her mom in a long time, so Rose says to the Doctor, "Can we go see my mom?" He goes, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And they get to her mom's place and find that she has like a games console, and she's like, "Oh, why have you got a games console for?" And she goes, "Oh, they were just giving them out for free down the market because I bought a certain amount of things, and they were bringing out free games." And it basically turns out that this game console is not a games console. It's a sort of, how can I explain it? It's like a training device. Anybody who gets to a certain sort of point in the game and gets to a certain sort of level will get invited to um, the headquarters of where this game's made, and then from there, the dark sort of things start to happen. Best way I can say it without trying to spoil the story for you. Um, but I love this story because the aliens that are in it, obviously, as you can imagine, it's something to do with aliens. That's not really a spoiler. That's kind of obvious when you talk about Doctor Who. But the aliens that are in this are ones I'd love to see in real life. Let's just say that, you know, there are moments where these sort of I'm going to describe them. It's going to sound silly how I describe them, but um, one faction. There's two different factions. One faction are giant porcupines, okay, alien porcupines, and the other faction are giant praying mantises. Now, if you know your animals, you know that porcupines eat insects, and the praying mantis, even though being quite big and quite deadly, well, I don't know. I've never seen a hedgehog against a praying mantis, but I think if a hedgehog was able to get close to one, obviously it's got its spikes to protect it. I guess it could. I guess if you made the hedgehog a bit bigger, potentially, maybe. Um, but these two warring factions, these two different alien races, are against each other. They're fighting a war between each other, and they haven't got many sort of soldiers left. So they kind of build this game in terms to play for humans to play that war for them. Um, and again, it's very silly. Again, it gets very dark at times. This is a very Mickey sort of centered story. Mickey kind of takes a centerfold in the story. Um, I'm not the biggest fan of Mickey. Not in this series. In the first season, he's a bit of a wimp. He's a bit of like a moaner. All he does is moan and mope about. He kind of grows into his own as sort of the seasons go on with the 10th Doctor. But when you first see him in this first season, he's a bit of a baby, to be honest. Um, but he slowly starts to grow, and as you can see, like this, his gamer sort of geeky side comes out. The Doctor, he's sort of warlike sort of side comes out. Um, again, you get more of Rose's mother, and you get a bit more of Rose. And it's just a nice little sort of human-based sort of story. Um, as for the final book, book 5, Only Human, this one is just insane. Like, if I was to recommend you any book from the Ninth Doctor, I would recommend Only Human. It is just crazy. It is it's mental. I know I didn't read the blurb for Winner Takes All because what I basically explained is the basic premise of it. But for Only Human, I'm going to talk about the blurb, because I'm going to need it to help me justify what I'm going to say. So this is the book's description. So somebody's interfering with time. The Doctor, Rose, and Captain Jack arrive on modern-day Earth to find the culprit and discover a Neanderthal man 28,000 years after his race became extinct. Only a trip back to primal dawn of humanity can solve the mystery. Who are the mysterious humans from the distant future now living in the distant past? What hideous monsters are trying to escape from behind the grey door? Is Rose going to end up married to a caveman? Caught between very different types of human beings, past, present, and future, the Doctor, Rose, and Captain Jack must learn the truth behind the Osterberg experiment before the monstrous Hybractus escapes to change humanity's history forever. This book is insane. This book is pure Doctor Who. Like, if there's no way to explain it, it is basically just batshit crazy sci-fi Doctor Who. Like, it's the kind of episode that, like, you wish it was a TV episode. You wish this was like something that there's no way they could do it because the budget would have been way too high for what, Doctor Who was and is even now, and probably what the BBC would willing to pay just for this one episode. Or even we'd have to be two parts. Um, it's just crazy. The basic sort of premise of it is that they they find a disturbance in time, follow it, find it's a caveman. So the Doctor's basically like, we're gonna have to figure out why this caveman's here, and they basically say to Jack, like, here you go, Jack, here's some money, look after him. Me and Rose are going to go back in time to figure out, why he's here. So there's two different storylines going on in this book. You've got the first storyline, which is the Doctor and Rose go back in time in prehistoric times to figure out as to how and why the Neanderthal is in our time, well, say 2005, 2006 time, and then also got to figure out what's going on. And then you've got timeline sort of two, what's going on modern day with Captain Jack and he's with the Neanderthal and trying to teach him English, trying to teach him the modern world and how it works. And obviously, Captain Jack being Captain Jack, it doesn't always go to plan. But it's the funniest parts are when it cuts back. There'll be moments where you'll have this really big, epic sort of moment going on with Rose and the Doctor, and then it will cut back, and it'll be like a diary entry of this caveman, how he's sort of talking about what him and Jack got up to, what him and Jack did, and like Jack ends up taking him to a nightclub and ends up getting him laid. And again, it's just incredibly crazy and insane. I love it. I really do. It's incredibly stupid, but it's stupid in the right way. It's not stupid as in like, oh, this is terrible. Like, it's in stupid as this is fantastic. This is funny. The aliens are great. The sort of creatures and the people that they meet in the past is funny. Captain Jack is complete 100% Captain Jack. The Neanderthal, he's fantastic. It's just one of them sort of stories that is just, it's so crazy that it's hard to explain. It's just one of those where you just have to kind of like, here's the book, read it and enjoy. And there's not much more I can say of it from that. Like, generally, it's just one of those that you've got to jump in and find for yourself. It's incredibly silly, incredibly fun, well written. You'll love it. That's the best I can say about it. So that's my three favourite books out of all six. By all means, jump in, give them a go. The Deviant Strain, it's not so great. If you're gonna, like, I listened to it from audiobook. The audiobook was really, like, the book wasn't itself bad. It's just the narrator they got was really, really bad, and that kind of ruined the book for me. So I recommend, if you're going to get round to read all these books, that you do read the Deviant Strain. You can do the audios on the rest, but the Deviant Exchange, I would recommend to sit and actually read that one, because as an audiobook it just doesn't work. But the rest are great, the rest are fine, the rest are really enjoyable. I highly recommend them all in a way. And yeah, so give them a go. So on to my overall thoughts on the Eighth Doctor, and kind of break down the Ninth Doctor as best as I can, or my interpretation of the Ninth Doctor. And finally, my overall thoughts. But before I jump into that, one thing I want to mention, because I'm just going through my notes before I started this one, one thing I forgot to mention is that there are comic books based off the Ninth Doctor. I think they started around about 2015. Um, I haven't really sort of delved into them much. I started reading them quite recently for this. Sadly, I was really busy yesterday, so I wasn't able to finish them. I'm about 2 away from finishing the first volume. I think there's about 5 volumes in total. Each one has about 5 comics to that one story. But even though I can't talk specifically about the overall story that I'm read, because I haven't gotten to the end of it, I do want to mention that it is quite cool. It is quite interesting, quite funny, well written, very crazy, very insane. But a lot of fun. So I do recommend sort of checking them out. I'm enjoying them so far, and when I get around to finishing them, I'll let you guys know if I remember. Most likely on Twitter. But there's that. So my overall thoughts on the ninth Doctor. So let's start with the season in general before I get onto the Doctor himself. My overall thoughts with the season is that it's a fantastic introduction to a character. That's what you want and what you needed, because that's basically inherently is the point of this season of Doctor Who, was the fact of it was the revival. It was bringing it back. It was trying to satisfy the old guard as well as bring in the new guard. You know, old fans and new fans, as well as trying to satisfy. It was trying its best to kind of tell a new story, that like the Time War happened. We didn't see the Time War, but the Time War happened, and this is kind of the outcome. This is the Doctor that kind of, after the Time War's ended, this is sort of the new Doctor that we've got. And the story kind of just continues from there. Kind of like we recognise what happened in the past and what took place with the older Doctors. But this is kind of like, it's kind of like a soft reboot. So they kind of use the Time War to kind of have a soft reboot. Being like, it happened, it took place a lot for over a long period of time. This new Doctor's very different, very changed, very new, trying to figure out who he is again. So he's trying to find out who he is, what he is, how to be, and that's it. Kind of move on from there. And I like that. I understand why they did that, and obviously, as a fan, as somebody who's coming into Doctor Who, quite very sort of new and very sort of green, it was a good call, because if they came out and just be like, oh, there's this and this Time War, and there was these old Doctors, it was like, hold on a second, you're too much, you're smothering me, slow down, stop. You know, it would have been too much for me to sort of figure out, especially now. Back in the day, back in the 2000s, we don't have streaming like we do now. Like, there was no way to kind of catch up. Like, if you wanted to catch up on the old sort of Doctor Who, especially, I don't think there was Amazon. There was no such thing as Amazon. So like back in the day, wanting to catch up with the old Doctor Who, it was like, I've got to go to like a car boot or like a charity shop, and hopefully they've got like an old episode on VHS that I can stick into my video player and watch. You know, I don't think they would have been on DVD at the time. You know, so going back and trying to watch these old Doctor Who episodes would have been a lot. So kind of like a fresh sort of reboot was a smart idea. And as I said, you know, as you go on with Christopher Eccleston, and as you go on with his Doctor, you kind of see the fact of he's trying to redeem himself and trying to get to the point where like he's no longer the warrior, that he is the Doctor, and that he is the hero. And he's trying to prove that self, not just to everybody else, but he's trying to prove that to himself. So that in its total, you know, this whole season is just a redemption arc. It's a very wonderful, beautiful redemption arc. Pardon me. It goes from being very happy and very funny and jokey to being very dark and very sad at times. again, like I said, the writing's fantastic, the directing's fantastic. Christopher Eccleston himself is fantastic. I know I'm using the word fantastic a lot, and ironically, that is the word that Christopher Eccleston's Doctor uses a lot, which is fantastic. Which I feel like that's where I've got it from, is why I use the word so proficiently. But not proficiently, so profusely, is that the right word? I use the word so much, um, because of watching Doctor Who and growing up with Christopher Eccleston, where I just everything is fantastic, you know, and obviously fantastic is fantastic, but for me fantastic means a lot more than fantastic. For me fantastic is it's brilliant, it's excellent, it's amazing, it's incredible. That one word to describe something that is fantastic, also means all these other sort of meanings. So I know I use it a lot, and I used to get teased for it, but I don't care. I know I use the word a lot, and I don't really care. I like the word, and it makes me happy. So yeah, leave me alone. Not that I'm sure that anybody listening to this is judging me. I'm just talking to myself now, self-affirming that it's okay to say that word without any worries. Um, but yeah, overall, fantastic season, fantastic Doctor. I just wish we had more Christopher Eccleston. Um, and obviously now on to the juicy part. Now breaking down my thoughts of what the Doctor is and what I think this Doctor is. Um, I have had a long time to think about this. I've had a long time to really proper meld on it, and obviously hindsight being what it is, and we've seen um, Paul McGann, him fighting in the Time War, and needing to be a different man and having to change himself into the War Doctor, Jonathan Hurt, and then from the War Doctor going on with the whole Bad Wolf sort of thing, meeting with Matt Smith and David Tennant's Doctor, and them going through all of that, and then finally he regenerated into Christopher Eccleston. Even without that, you can see that this whole sort of arc, this whole sort of story, is a redemption. It's a redemption arc that the Doctor needs, because as we said, the Doctor's been through the Time War. He's been through a lot. He's done a lot of bad things. He's killed people. He's done mass genocide multiple times. Um, he went to a very dark place, and I feel like with this Doctor, he's trying to redeem himself. He's trying to save people. He's trying to be the hero again. He's trying to rediscover that part of him that he thought was lost. And he does. He finds Rose, and Rose brings out that human sort of side of him that he lost. That he became full Gallifreyan. He became full Time Lord. Very sort of, heartless, and very much like, I need to get the job done no matter what, no matter the cost. Again, that's why Paul McGann's Doctor changed into the War Doctor. Is because he couldn't be. He needed to be a man that he knew he couldn't. He could be, but he couldn't be. You know what I mean? He wants to be the man, but he can't, because morally he knows inside himself he is not that person. And like, again, you see it with like Tom Baker, where like he has the moment where he could destroy all of Daleks, but then he kind of, and Sarah Jane's like, "What are you waiting for?" And he's like, "But do I have the right? Like, all I have to do is put these two wires together, and that's it. The Daleks are done for, gone. I never have to deal with them ever again. But do I have the right to kill all the Daleks? You know what I mean? Do I have the right to do that? Because think about all these lives that are going to be, not all these races that will never meet the Daleks, will never know that struggle. And you probably think, well, what do you mean know that struggle? Never know the fact of coming together, saving themselves, you know, coming together, having that unity, that common goal, that common enemy, where they can unite and become peaceful. All these worlds that never experience this. Do I have the right to sort of choose that fate? And in the end, like, spoilers, Tom Baker's Doctor, he doesn't do it. But obviously the War Doctor would have done it, and he did do it. You know, so even though the Doctor can go to a very dark place, and as we see with the later version with like Peter Capaldi and David Tennant, and even Matt Smith at times, you do get to a point where he can't be that man, so he has to change into the War Doctor. And I feel like with this Doctor, now he's sort of coming back to who he is. He's trying to figure out who he is. Am I still that person? Am I still the Doctor, or am I still the war hero? So you have that redemption arc as well. And one of the beautiful things about this episode is that, in the second episode, it kind of takes him to this space station where you see the Earth being destroyed, and how he's trying to save the day, but every time he tries to save the day, somebody has to die in the process. You know, that tree lady, she dies within helping the Doctor. You know, and there's moments throughout the seasons where like he tries to be the hero, and he knows that he can save the day, but he knows that if he saves the day, Rose might die, and that he can't live with himself knowing that he potentially killed Rose. You know, and that she said, "Do it," just do it, and he goes, "Well, you want me to do it, but you know that you will die." And she goes, "Well, it's the right thing to do. You have a plan. I know you will. You wouldn't say it if it meant this wasn't the right thing to do." And there's many moments in this where he just has that sort of clarity of like, I don't have to be that man anymore. I don't have to be the guy that just chooses the destruction path. There are other avenues. And at the very, very end, at the final episode, he gets a chance to save the day and be the war hero, to be the war doctor, to stop the Daleks, to save everything. And the Dalek says to him like, you know, can you do this? This is what you are. You are a good Dalek. You just care about destruction no matter what the cost, and about extermination. And he goes like, I'll do it. And in the end, he just, again, this moment makes me cry, where he has it in his hand, and you have that moment of just realizing, of where he realizes, I'm no longer that man. I'm no longer the war hero. And he just looks up, and you can tell he's in tears. He's crying because he's also had that mental breakthrough. He's had that redemption sort of breakthrough of like imagine if for your whole life you've been told that you are a bad person, that you are, you're evil, that that you're not a very good person. You would tend to believe it, that you go for a whole lifetime where this is what you believe who you are, because this is what you've been told you are. And because you've been told that, this is how you act, this is how you behave, this is how you treat others, this is how you treat yourself. And eventually one day you get to the point where you do something good, and not just because you want to do something, not because you felt like you should do something good. Inherently you just did good because that's just what felt right at the time. It wasn't a choice, you just did it. And you have that realization of like, I just helped somebody. I just did good without having to be told to be good. I did it because in morally and internally I wanted to be good. I wanted to be the hero. And that's basically the idea and the premise of this sort of moment, where the Doctor has that revelation of just like, I'm no longer the bad guy. I'm no longer the destroyer. I am a coward. And that's a good thing. I would rather, and as he says, I would rather be a coward any day than to kill any more people. And that kind of sends a ripple and sends an arc for the rest of the Doctors, for the rest of the seasons going ahead, with like David Tennant, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi. It sends a ripple for all the Doctors of us like, I would rather be the coward than to be the destroyer, than to be the guy that kills everybody, to do mass genocide. I'd rather run away than to stick around to watch everybody burn, to kill everybody, to not save the day. I'd rather run away. And that's quite noble and quite courageous, and a very sort of loving sort of moment. And it's very nice for, again, his Doctor to have that sort of moment of just like, I am no longer that man. And then to, obviously, sadly, we know as to why he regenerates, because of obviously creative differences, Chris Eccleston, and wanting just to kind of part ways on a good footing. And that's where David Tennant comes in. But also, story-wise, it works as well, because this Doctor had a moment of revelation where like he's no longer that man, and now he kind of regenerates into the man that he can be, that he wants to be, that he should be. He regenerates into the Doctor. And as we go with David Tennant, we see that's the man that he wanted to be, but he needed to prove to himself that he could be, to be that man, to deserve to be that man. And he finally gets round to being able to be that man in David Tennant, because obviously even though different faces, different people playing different character, it's still the same character, still the same memories, same feelings, same thoughts. Just because they look different and they act different doesn't mean they are different people. So internally, it was for the Doctor needing to know that I can be that person again, and then to regenerate and to become to David Tennant to be able to be that person. Obviously, as we followed with David Tennant, we saw him, the whole Time Lord, victorious and going very dark and very power hungry. And again, one day when I get round to doing a David Tennant um, special, when I talk about David Tennant, I will get into more into the whole Time Lord victorious story, because it's very interesting. But yeah, Chris Eccleston, he's the Doctor that needed redeeming, and he finally gets the redemption he needs, and he redeems himself. And again, like I mentioned, it sends a ripple for the rest of the Doctors moving forwards. And this is why I agree with Christopher Eccleston. He made the recent statement where he said that his Doctor isn't a multi-Doctor Doctor, that his Doctor is a one-man sort of show, and that if they want him back, he has to be on his own. And I agree with that. And the reason I agree with that is because of the fact of the turmoil he's going through. You know, the whole fact of he's been through the Time War for so long on his own. He's done all the things he's done, and now he's regenerated into a new man, into a new body, into a new person, and he's trying to figure out where he fits. Is he still the Doctor? Is he still a good person? Is he still a good man? Um, and he goes through that redemption that I don't think it would work if you brought in David Tennant or Matt Smith or Peter Capaldi or Jodie Whittaker. It wouldn't work if you brought any of those in, because even though you could have a moment where he looks at those Doctors and be like, it's nice to see that I've changed, it's nice to see that I'm right, I feel like it would discredit the whole season. It would discredit the whole sort of moment, the whole sort of arc where he tries to learn if he can be a good man, where he has that redemption, where he finally figures out that he can be that man, and for him internally to figure that on his own, not to see not to see him change, because he's changed, if that makes sense. Seeing meeting other Doctors, I just don't think it would work. And again, as I mentioned, this Doctor, even though he has Rose, this Doctor is still a one man show. He still is his own sort of thing. He's still trying to figure out who he is and where he stands. So Rose is there to guide him. Rose is there to be his shining beacon of just like to keep him on the path of good, to make sure he doesn't veer off that path. That's why Rose is there. But even though Rose is that person, he's still a one man show. Even when Jack's there, again, Jack, even though Jack's there and when Rose is there, they're just there to keep him on track. They're not there to kind of um, to make the decision. At the end of the day, the decision is still his. It's just Rose's or Jack's opinion changes that decision somewhat and kind of molds him to be the good guy, to be the man he knows he wants to be and can be. He just has to find that person. He has to put himself in those situations to help that person come out. And I find that very fascinating, very interesting, and very deep. And again, another reason why I always come back was people shouldn't skip 9. 9 is very integral to the overall arc of who the Doctor is, who this modern Doctor is. From Chris Eccleston to David Tennant to Matt Smith to Peter Capaldi to Jodie Whittaker, he is this type of Doctor. This is who this Doctor is, and it took to understand those Doctors. You have to understand this Doctor. You'd have to understand 9, and to understand 9, you have to understand the War Doctor. That's one of the things I love about that sort of the 50th anniversary, that whole sort of thing they did with the War Doctor and Peter McGann, was that Paul McGann, was that it gave you a better understanding of what the Doctor went through the Time War, which then in turn gave you a better understanding of who the Ninth Doctor is now, especially as well with reading the books and going through the graphic novel that I'm going through at the moment, the comic book, and listening to snippets of the Big Finish sort of stories, that sort of you realize that he's just a man that's trying to redeem himself, that he's the man that's trying to prove not just to himself but to to the universe that he deserves this role. He deserves to be the Doctor again, but he has to first prove himself to himself that he deserves to be the Doctor. And I think that's very loving. And I think there are moments where he deals with PTSD. There are moments where he deals with the sort of self-sacrifice where it's like, do I deserve to live? Do I deserve to be here? And there are many moments where he's like, I will just sacrifice myself. I don't care. Go on, kill me. Go on, do it. And there are moments where like you're not sure, where it's like, does he know that they wouldn't do it, or generally thinking like, if they do it, they do it. Screw it. Like, kill me. I'm ready to go. Like, I don't deserve to be alive. I don't know. It's again, it's very complex, very deep, but it's one of those sort of questions where you have to sit there and you have to think of us like, is he suicidal? You know, is that part of him having his PTSD? Is that part of him having to go through stuff? And again, again, another thing I love about the books is the books go to that length. The books go to that point where you see the Doctor struggling with the war. You're struggling with the choice of consequences, the choice of being the Doctor, the choice of being this person, this man. And it's very deep. It's very loving. And again, this is what I love about the Ninth Doctor, is that it's deeper than what people give credit for. People just see on the surface one season, blah. I ain't gonna sit and watch it. I'm gonna jump straight to David Tennant. And again, I don't blame people for doing that. I really don't, because David Tennant is amazing. But I will still stand hard and say it's very foolish to skip the Ninth Doctor when there are so much to the Doctor, when there's so much to his transaction with Rose, with his transactions with um, uh, Jack, with his transactions with Mickey, with transactions with the universe, with other characters, with um, his transactions with himself. And again, it's this very loving, very wonderful sort of thing. And I just feel like, you know, the Ninth Doctor deserves more love. And I would love to see the Ninth Doctor back. But, you know, after hearing what Chris Eccleston said recently, like, if they want him back, he has to be on his own. Would they do it? I don't think the BBC would. But it's just nice to know that, you know, there is a way that he would come back if they did it. Would they? Don't know. Would like to, obviously. But that's it, you know. So that's my overall thoughts on the Ninth Doctor and this season and the books and all the things that come with it. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you liked it. Again, this is my 10th episode, so I wanted it to be a big one. But I obviously, with every episode that I do worry about how long these episodes go on for, and if people are really enjoying them. But I'm guessing, I'm just going to go on a limb here, that if I've done like 18 plus episodes, well, this being the 18th, this being the 10th one of the main series, and obviously 18 overall, and people are still listening, and I'm still getting loads of people listening and enjoying it and giving feedback. I have to kind of give some sort of idea and some concept in my mind that if all this is happening and people are enjoying it, and I'm at this point that people don't mind the episodes being so long, so I've got to stop judging myself and beating myself up for doing long episodes. If people like them, if people enjoy them, then I'll keep doing them. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one, and thank you for staying with me through um, all these episodes and all these different topics, and listening and enjoying and giving good feedback and sharing it and following me on Twitter. It means so much to me. If you're listening to me on Spotify, don't forget to give a rating. At 1 to 5, whatever you feel like is fair. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Nerdstalgic_pod, or just type in Nerdstalgic podcast and you should find my flaming face on there. Easy to find. Just give me a follow. Drop feedback. Let me know what you thought. If you liked an episode, good or bad. Obviously, you know, everybody wants good feedback, but good or bad, whatever it is you want to tell me, let me know. All feedback is good feedback at the end of the day. It all helps to improve, to make things better. And yeah, so I think that's everything. Yeah, that's everything. So that's what, again, before I go, I just want to say thank you. Generally, from the bottom of my heart, it means a lot for all your support, you listening here now. Thank you. If you're listening on your car or on your phone, thank you. It means so much. And yeah, so as always, stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace, and thank you so much for listening. It means so much. Thank you. Thank you.